What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly update. There's lots of exciting news to go over here this week, but before I get into the news, I first want to mention I'll be doing my usual weekly live stream here on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, so join if you can. It's always a fun time hanging out and talking cars with all of you. Now, getting into the news here this week. BMW this week has debuted the first ever CS wagon, officially called the M3 CS Touring. And if you're already familiar with the M3 CS, there's nothing new here other than the body style and the fact that this one won't come to the US, sadly, just like the regular M3 Touring. But for those still interested, it does 20 more horsepower than a regular M3 Touring for 543 horsepower, along with 479 pound-feet of torque that's put through an 8-speed automatic to an all-wheel drive system that does still have a rear-wheel drive mode. It's 33 pounds lighter and is 0.1 second faster for the 0 to 62 mile per hour time, now at 3.5 seconds, and the top speed is 186 miles per hour. It gets the carbon fiber aero kit you see, the yellow DRLs, the unique forged wheels, and a few of the other little trim and adjustment pieces there. And inside you get carbon bucket seats and a few other carbon fiber bits throughout the cabin. It's available in just 4 colors: British Racing Green, Laguna Seca Blue, Sapphire Black, and Frozen White. BMW hasn't said how many of these they'll make just yet, but the last few CS were under 2,000 cars, so even if you do live in a market that gets this, it'll be tough to get. And speaking of those markets, it'll be sold in Europe, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and other regions, they say, starting in March, and it'll be priced at the equivalent of $159,000, which actually puts it more expensive than the M5 Touring we are getting here in the States. Obviously a very different beast, but yeah, pretty pricey, but obviously very collectible and a very sweet car. And awesome to see the first ever wagon CS, and man, that thing seems like a really cool package. And there's good news this week if you're a fan of gas-powered Alfa Romeos, with their North American CEO telling Automotive News recently at the NADA show that Alfa is scrapping their goal of going EV only in North America by 2027, saying instead that they will use a multi-energy strategy that consists of gas, electric, and plug-in hybrids. And so she explained that we've got 110 dealers in our US network. It would be very challenging for them to survive with a BEV-only portfolio. So don't get too excited about motors like the Quadrifolio's twin-turbo V6 coming back, because that has ended production, and anyone that understands supply chains knows that once that supplier is done building these engines, they move on to building other things, and you can't just bring stuff back from the dead super easily. So I wouldn't, hold out any hope for that kind of stuff. But, I think it's possible we could get the Hurricane inline 6 motor. Maybe Alfa could fiddle with it and make it, a little bit more high revving, or, something so that it's not just the same motor we're getting in trucks and Chargers, also in this. So we'll see. But it sounds like we'll be starting to see the beginning of this new approach very soon here, with the global Alfa Romeo CEO previously saying that they had the flexibility to do gas versions of the Giulia and Stelvio, since they're on the STLA Large platform for their new generation, and that platform, of course, is shared with the Charger, it's shared with the Wagoneer S I just reviewed this past week. There's a lot of stuff going to be on this platform, and we do know that platform obviously can accommodate the gas engines like we see in Charger. So the new Stelvio is supposedly coming this year, is the rumor. I don't think we actually have confirmation of that still, but I think it's supposed to be coming this year, with the Giulia coming next year. And dealers were also asked at the conference whether they would like to see the Junior brought to the United States here, which was previously called the Milano, and then the Italian government got in a whole feud with Alfa. It's not called the Junior. But that little thing's available with both gas, hybrid, and electric powertrains. So would kind of, again, do that multi-energy approach there. And so we'll see, what the dealers say and what Alfa decides to do with that one. But, looking forward to seeing the new Stelvio and Giulia here pretty soon. And speaking of the Giulia, though, in a new interview with French publication L'Argus, the global CEO of Alfa told them Giulia will get a new design and a new type of bodywork, and that its platform will be the same as that of the Stelvio. So you can imagine what kind of vehicle we will offer. But no, we actually can't imagine what kind of vehicle that will offer, because the Stelvio and Giulia are already on the same platform for the current generation, and that has provided us with a sedan and an SUV. So sharing platforms should mean we still have the possibility, at least, of sedan and SUV. So it doesn't actually clarify things, at least in my opinion, but there's been some suggestion here in his comments that it'll get some SUV-like cues. So I'm really hoping that Giulia doesn't just turn into a Stelvio coupe, essentially, and a coupier kind of a roofline for Stelvio. That's kind of probably the worst case scenario for that name. But others reports have suggested that in the past it'll be like a liftback, and that falls right in line with what we're seeing like with the new next generation Audi A5 here that just debuted. That now has the liftback on all of them. And so I think that makes the most sense. I think we're seeing a lot of these sedans pivot to the liftback just because, one, it's awesome and makes it more practical, and two, it kind of allows some people to kind of be like, okay, yeah, maybe I don't need the SUV. I have the hatchback kind of thing here, and this still actually works. So I think it's a good idea that should have happened a long time ago, and so happy to see if that is the way that it goes. Great. But hopefully they don't try and turn it into some kind of like, Volvo cross-country competitor or something else that's too SUV-like. But we'll see. And also past comments from the former CEO of Alfa Romeo about the Giulia have also revealed that what we designed is a bomb. We couldn't finalize the style of this car without being absolutely in love with it. And now we are. That was one of the last quotes from them. And so sounds very promising. Again, hopefully we see it, either this year or next year. And very interesting to hear that. And good to hear that Alfa, continues with the gas powertrains there for those who, love gas-powered Alfas. Alfa has made some great gas-powered stuff in the past. Hopefully, this multi-energy thing brings us some really exciting gas stuff, some really exciting plug-in hybrids, and some really exciting EVs still from Alfa as well. And there's some good news for Porsche enthusiasts here this week, because it sounds like despite the manual not being offered for the first time on the Carrera S, which I just talked about recently, the head of Porsche's GT division seems adamant on them remaining for the GT3 at least. Talking to Motor One at the media drive for the new GT3, he said, "From my personal point of view, it was always super important to have a manual." And even has said here, "I prefer a manual as a driver's car. I don't mind shifting a car even on the track, knowing exactly that the PDK is faster. I think it's always good to have choices, and it was always in my head, even on the 991, to bring back the manual transmission, which we did through the 911R." He also gave us some interesting tidbits of info here that kind of contradicts what we've been hearing from Europe in regards to why the manual transmission has been going away. This is the justification that like Volkswagen gave for the demise of the GTI and the Golf R manual is, well, we have to do it for emissions regulations, and the manual is worse for emissions. And maybe in testing purposes it is in that environment, but that doesn't seem to be the case in the real world here with the same person here saying, in regards to at least the GT3, the manual is lighter, so it contributes to better consumption and to less emissions. And you have more power at the wheel because the internal resistance of a manual gearbox is substantially lower than on a PDK. You don't have a power pack that has to produce hydraulic power for the clutch system. You don't have two clutches that run through a wet sump, which is resistance as well. In real world, the manual car uses less gas and therefore puts out less emissions than the PDK. That's a fact. So, there you have it. Again, maybe there is some explanation for why the situation would be different for, these other manual cars that are supposedly going away due to emissions. It's one thing if manuals go away because of take rate. If people just don't want it, that's one thing. But, GTI, for example, had a really great manual take rate. There was no good reason to get rid of it, especially if now the, apparently, at least, if it's the same kind of setup as the dual clutch and the PDK, it's going to be worse for emissions. But again, maybe in a lab, it performs better, and that's all that matters to Volkswagen. I don't know, but that was just new info that I had not previously heard from any other engineers or anything about manual versus dual clutches. So that was really interesting. I'm happy that he shared that. I don't know, I'd love to hear more about this from other engineers and other people in the industry here. But lastly, to really drive the point home here about their commitment to the manual in the GT3, he said, "The manual in combination with the high revving 9,000 RPM ICE engine is just such a big, huge fun factor. I think we are in the entertainment business with this car. It's not a means of transportation. We have to go for the smiles." And man, it's so refreshing to hear Porsche say this. you know, they were a company like many others, especially European companies, that were chasing lap times, chasing the fastest 0 to 60 time, the fastest everything. And the PDK is certainly that. He acknowledges that. But it seems like they've really had an awakening as far as just realizing, look, it's about fun. Let's put our pride aside. Let's, you know, drop the whole, you know, elitist thing of having to be the fastest in every way. And let's just put smiles on faces. I want to like stand up and applaud Porsche for this interview. This is fantastic to hear all this stuff. So good. I'm so glad that Motor One had this conversation with them. And also, it appears that buyers agree with him here because, at least in the U.S., they also shared the U.S. take rate. The take rate for the manual on the GT3 is at 46% currently. And on the GT3 Touring, it's an impressive 75% of buyers that go for the manual transmission in these things. So, good job, Porsche GT3 buyers, on speccing the manual, and especially those touring buyers for going for the manual especially. That is fantastic. And this is how you keep the manual alive. This is how you do it. I know not everyone has the luxury of buying a manual Porsche or a manual anything new, but for those who do, this is how you keep this stuff around. Send a clear message, not just, you know, a tiny little take rate, but a giant amount of people buying the manuals. That's how you keep it around. And now we see, you know, Porsche was on its path to, you know, keep everything be PDK, and then, you know, they started to see this demand for the manual, and then they started to see people actually putting their money where their mouth is and buying these things, and now we have awesome manuals in Porsches still, and this is just such fantastic news. Sorry, it really fires me up. So awesome to hear that, and man, I wish I could afford one of those GT3s to support the cause. In some other manual news here, some people were wondering why the new Toyota 4Runner wasn't offered with a manual transmission, since the Tacoma is, and it's obviously very closely related to the 4Runner. So Car and Driver actually asked Toyota about this last week on the media drive, and Toyota told them that a manual 4Runner could be possible, but said that actual customers aren't asking for one. So that, combined with the fact that it was actually, they revealed a 2% take rate for manual Tacoma last year in the States. So that means it's probably not worth offering. I mean, 2% take rate, I don't blame them. I was shocked they even offered it in Tacoma, and I'm shocked they're continuing to offer it in Tacoma after 2024's sales here. Maybe it'll improve. We'll see. Yeah, basically, again, the message here is if you want a manual 4Runner, one, you have to go tell your dealer and reach out to Toyota and, you know, social or whatever, and let them know you want a manual 4Runner. And then it probably wouldn't hurt in the meantime to pick up a manual Tacoma to send the message also with money. You probably wouldn't lose any money on the Tacoma anyway, or very little. Buy a manual Tacoma, support that cause. And then, you know, once the manual 4Runner comes, if it does come, then you have, you know, that. And if you don't have, you know, the 4Runner ever come in a manual, then you just put a cab on the back of your Tacoma, and you have very close to what a new 4Runner is anyway. So, anyway, but, yeah, hopefully the business case can be made for that, but it doesn't seem likely. So I just, again, grab the Tacomas while you can, because I wouldn't hold your breath for the 4Runner here. But anyway, moving on here. Tesla has surprised us late last week with a sooner reveal of the U.S. version of the refreshed Model Y than we were initially expecting. Because for the Model 3, the Model 3 was a very delayed rollout, and so for Model Y here, we were expecting the same, at least I was, and instead they turned it around pretty quickly. I'm guessing maybe because sales dropped for the first time last year for Tesla. Now they're having a little bit more pressure on them. But anyway, as far as the U.S. specific details, you know, I already covered all the general upgrades of the, you know, refreshed Model Y whenever that came out a couple weeks ago. You can check out that video if you want to hear all the details. But as far as the U.S. specific stuff that we now know, right now, there's just a launch edition that's going to be available for this refreshed Model Y, and it's a fully loaded long-range all-wheel drive, and they, of course, will fill out their lineup with other things eventually, but it does 9 more miles of range for 320 miles total now, and it can add 154 miles of range in 15 minutes now. It's also more powerful, dropping the 0 to 60 time from 4.8 seconds to 4.1. It also gets an upgraded suspension, acoustic glass, and new body casting designs, they say, which are all designed to make the ride whisper quiet, according to Tesla. And pricing does go up by about $4,000 compared to a comparable long-range all-wheel drive version of the pre-refresh Model Y with the full self-driving option selected, which these launch editions do come with. So if we're comparing apples to apples, it's $4,000. Some people were super upset because it looks like it's $12,000 difference, but it's because the $12,000 doesn't account for the full self-driving option on the regular old Model Y. So $4,000 more. I'm actually thinking $4,000 more isn't that bad of an upcharge, all things considered, because you're now getting stuff like the new rear screen, you're getting the ventilated seats, all these other refinement improvements, you're getting the battery improvements, you're getting the power improvements. Dropping from a 4.8 to 4.1 seconds or to 60 is a huge leap in performance, and that alone would in most other companies cost you more than $4,000 to get. So you get that, and you get all the other stuff, and you get the fresh looks. I honestly think they priced this well. I've seen a lot of complaints online, but I don't know why, because to me this seems pretty well priced, all things considered. Anyway, deliveries are going to be starting here in March for those. So, I'm sure they're going to start having a little bit of a backlog as the early adopters get lined up for those. But, interesting to see that. In some other Tesla news here, on their earnings call this week, they again said a more affordable model is on track to actually begin production in the first half of this year. And said these vehicles will utilize aspects of the next generation platform as well as aspects of our current platforms and will be produced on the same manufacturing lines as our current vehicle lineup. And this is still a complete mystery to me, and I'm sure to many others, because I don't believe we've seen anything spied. There's been really no other info provided about this vehicle aside from apparently there was a separate investor report that said something about some Cybertruck internal components potentially being used for future vehicles, which is an obvious thing that a lot of the stuff's going to trickle down to new product in the future, but that's all we really know. We have at this point 5 months before that deadline hits, and I don't know if we're going to actually see something. This is the second time they've said they were on track for this reveal, and I have no clue what to expect here. People have theorized a variety of different things. My best guess is it's going to be the Cybercab, but a driver version of that. Maybe that's what they're doing. I have no clue, though. That's my best guess. But anyway, interesting to hear that. We'll just have to stay tuned. In some other EV news here, Lucid announced this week that the Gravity can hit a peak charge rate of 400 kilowatts, which I believe makes it the fastest charging EV in the U.S. here. And it's impressive. It'll require one of the very rare 1,000 kilowatt fast chargers. But if you can find one of those, it'll add 200 miles of range in just 12 minutes. So a really nice evolution here as far as charge speeds. That's really wild. And it's able to do this thanks to its 926 volt platform, its advanced cooling system, and a new Panasonic battery cell that they've developed. But even if you can't do the full 400 kilowatts, even hitting like the top 350 kilowatt that a lot of these EVgo and Electrify America chargers, most of those will do up to 350, at least hypothetically. Even that is going to be very, very nice. But really cool if you could hit that full 400. They also announced Tesla Supercharger access for all Lucid models in general, and the Gravity now charges faster there than the Air, doing 225 kilowatt fast charging on a 500 volt Tesla V3 charger, they said. And that's also no small feat, since it has to boost the voltage using the car's rear motor, like drive motor apparently, to somehow, I don't know how they do it, but to boost the voltage so that it matches the 926 there and put the charge into the battery. And apparently that's very hard to do. I think Hyundai has also started to do that, but trying to make these things compatible with these Tesla superchargers is apparently pretty challenging. And so kudos to them for not only doing it, but also doing it with really fast charge speeds here. Lucid is still, in my opinion, doing some really cool stuff here. Also, the Gravity here is the first vehicle to go on sale with an NACS port, with the 2025 Ioniq 5 from Hyundai following it very shortly, but I believe Gravity can claim to be the first. And for anyone that's curious about the status of the Gravity, by the way, I actually was, because I was like, are they still like going to build these things, or what's the deal with that? They actually already started deliveries to employee orders along with friends and family orders of those employees, and more widespread deliveries they say should begin soon. So they're actually already building them. I didn't recall an actual media drive or anything like that yet, but I'm guessing we'll see that stuff relatively soon. But yeah, great to see those advancements in charging, and this is the kind of stuff I've been talking about for a couple of years now, seeing these little advancements little by little and making some real progress here. And again, it's only 2025. I think there's going to be some really cool stuff here even throughout the year and into next year. But moving on here. BMW has revealed the refreshed iX for the 2026 model year, and along with the tweaked styling and mechanical setups being different, there's also a lower cost trim now called the xDrive 45 that still does 402 horsepower and 312 miles of range, so it's not much of a downgrade there. And the xDrive 60 version replaces the old 50 version and now does 536 horsepower and has 340 miles of range. Lastly, the M60 is now replaced by an M70 top model. That one does 650 horsepower, a 3.6 second 0 to 60 time, and 302 miles of range. For the styling changes, it gets new headlights, a new grille, and front bumper. Out back, there's just a new rear diffuser on certain trims and packages. There's also some new paint and wheel options. Inside, there's a new M multifunction seat that includes ventilation, and these are going to be beginning to be delivered here in the second quarter of this year. And thanks to that new base trim, the starting price has dropped by $10,000, now starting at $76,325, including destination, with the 60 version still starting at nearly $90,000, and that M70 version starting at $112,675. So really nice little improvements there. I think it actually does improve the styling there on the iX, and really nice to see that. Renault has built this wild car for real as a one-off to break various records for power consumption and EV range, looking to beat the now less wild, in comparison, Mercedes Vision EQXX concept that managed 8.4 miles per kilowatt hour. And so that's a very high bar already, but I mean, it seems like they will beat it, because this car runs an 87 kilowatt hour battery, and despite its large and wild styling that's also supposed to pay homage to various historical Renaults, it only weighs 2,204 pounds, and 1,322 of those pounds are from the battery. So how they got basically the entire rest of the car built like 900 pounds is wild. They say it's made from aluminum, carbon, and steel alloys, and they said they used AI to help find ways to eliminate excess materials. I didn't see a horsepower number given for this, but I'm guessing it's pretty slow considering how it's so focused on efficiency. But best of luck to them on the record breaking, and man, they would make a boatload of money if they found a way to build a few dozen of these things for some billionaires. I mean, they could make these things $10 million, even if it's super slow. I mean, just you drive through Monte Carlo or someplace like that, and this thing, man, I mean, that statement is definitely worth, I'm sure, several millions of dollars to people with money to burn. So, but if nothing else, it'll be very cool just to be the record holder there, and let's see what they'll do. But good luck to them on that record-breaking attempt. And one group of people that definitely are not thinking about efficiency whatsoever is the new U.S. Department of Transportation. And the only reason why I'm covering this is because these new emissions changes are going to affect at least some of the short-term plans of car companies. Obviously, long-term stuff is going to be what it's going to be. But, little things that can be adjusted here to accommodate the next 4 years, most likely will be for some of these car companies, and it will affect us. So that's why I'm covering this very briefly. And so, anyway, the U.S. Department of Transportation put out a memorandum this week that specifically reduces the burdensome and overly restrictive fuel standards that have needlessly driven up the cost of a car in order to push a radical Green New Deal agenda. Which is funny considering Trump's planning huge 25% tariffs on anything imported from Canada and Mexico, which I'm assuming includes cars. 25% price increase, in addition to the domino effect that has on everything else, will make cars 25% more expensive. Like, so, you're worried about supposedly, fuel emission standards causing prices to go up, and then you're raising prices 25% immediately. So, that was kind of funny. Anyway, as Motor One also pointed out, this statement is easily proven false also because the Prius, for example, has improved its efficiency by 11 mpg in the past 20 years, and when adjusted for inflation, has gotten $5,500 cheaper than the car from 2005. And you're getting better efficiency. Exactly going against what this dude's saying, and invalidating it immediately. And even sports cars like the Miata did 23 mpg combined 30 years ago. And now it does 29 mpg combined, while starting about $400 less, again, when adjusted for inflation. And again, these cars are all faster than they ever have been, offer more than they ever have. That's the beauty of engineering, is we've had our cake and eaten it too. More efficiency and more power and more safety and more technology. All these things for the same or less money. I know everyone's brains haven't adjusted to new inflated prices, and that's understandable. But, like, the actual numbers prove this stuff to be wrong these people are talking about. And so, anyway, the department hasn't yet specified what changes they plan to make to fuel economy standards, or whether they'll have any fuel economy standards at all. That's totally anyone's guess at this point. We'll just have to wait and see. But Trump's new Unleashing America and American Energy executive order gives us a few hints here on what we can potentially expect, mentioning promoting more choices in vehicles and eliminating an EV mandate, which never existed, by the way, but eliminating an EV mandate and canceling subsidies that favor EVs. Even though the U.S. also, by the way, spends about $646 billion each year on fossil fuel subsidies. Anyway, in case anyone had any doubts, it sounds like emissions regulations will be a free-for-all most likely for the next 4 years, and it'll be interesting to watch, to say the least. But it's just obviously worth pointing out, if you want an EV, get your $7,500 tax credit now. Get these things. I mean, there's actually, at the end of this year, right after the election, there was a huge spike in EV sales. That's going to continue here into this year because a lot of people already realize this. It's going away. And so it's kind of hilarious that it's actually promoting EV sales with this panic, at least, in the short term. But, yeah, so very interesting to see that. We will see how that plays out. And despite this free-for-all and potentially even loosening restrictions in the EU, that are being debated over there, it appears that Audi is still planning to downsize the RS models, according to a new report by Car Magazine. They claim that despite that 4-liter twin-turbo V8, still being in the Volkswagen family lineup there, it's going to continue in the Porsche Cayenne and all these other vehicles. Audi has elected to ditch it for their 2.9-liter twin-turbo V6 and combine it with a plug-in hybrid powertrain to produce 725 horsepower, supposedly, which would be over 100 horsepower more than the current RS7, and would put it around the new M5's output, which that vehicle does with a twin-turbo V8 and a plug-in hybrid. Which I feel like, they're doing that. Mercedes is also doing the same with the twin-turbo V8 and the plug-in hybrid. I kind of worry about Audi, again, especially these days, everyone's still clinging on to the V8s. This actually, I think, is probably a mistake just as far as a marketing standpoint. And we'll see how it actually plays out for them. But the report goes on to say that an 800 horsepower version, performance variant, will arrive sometime later, which is funny because RS7 is already supposed to be top performance, but they now have these new performance variants that they add later on to do even more power. And the report also adds that Audi will be sticking to their new plan of even-numbered vehicles being EVs, and that would mean that the RS6 will become the RS6 e-tron and will be fully electric still. And they say that both will debut sometime this year, actually. So it'll be interesting to see that. And Mitsubishi this week has revealed a new Outlander Sport, but only for South Africa, of all places. And it's essentially the X-Force model that debuted in Indonesia back in 2023. And so when Motor One reached out to a Mitsubishi spokesperson here in the States, that spokesperson told them that this vehicle was never engineered for North America, which is fine, but the current Outlander Sport we have here is 15 years old at this point, and not in a good way. It's not like it's increasing in sales like a 4Runner or something. Like, the sales are continuing to drop off, understandably so, and I really wonder what Mitsubishi's doing here. I'm not going to go into a full rant, but like, what is the point of Mitsubishi being here? They have the Outlander and that's it. It's like everything else is so uncompetitive and so dated. It's just a shame. I don't know what's going on. As for some more confusing Mitsubishi news here, it continues because Japanese newspaper Yomiuri claims that Mitsubishi will not be joining the forming of this whole merger and partnership here with Nissan and Honda, and that they prefer to remain independent, supposedly. And so Mitsubishi responded to the report by saying that they're still evaluating their options. So they're still making it seem like they're still considering it. Maybe they still are. Who knows? But, Nissan already owns 24% of Mitsubishi. It's not like Mitsubishi is actually really independent. They haven't been for a while. So why they're taking this tact now? And again, it seems like they could use the help. I know Mitsubishi is like a giant, especially in the Asian Pacific, region and stuff. But again, here in the States, especially, they could use the help. You would think they'd want to pile into this partnership so that if Nissan makes a new Xterra, or they could even just take the Nissan Armada and throw some Montero badges on it. There's so many things they could do. And so, I don't know. I really don't know what Mitsubishi's doing because they had the Nissan portfolio to pull from already to, badge engineer some stuff, and they haven't. And I just don't know who in Mitsubishi is looking at the lineup that they've had for the past few years and is like, yep, that's great. Let's stick with that. I don't understand if there's just no investment being made by Japan or what, but then, what are those Japanese, leaders thinking? I really do not understand. Like, either put out good product or leave. Like, it just, I don't know. I don't understand it. But maybe they will leave the U.S. and be content to sell elsewhere in the world. I don't know, but just really bizarre the moves that Mitsubishi continues to make here. Anyway, though, lastly, there's a few vehicles that were discontinued here or announced that they'll be discontinued here this week. So first off, Infiniti has announced that the QX50 and QX55 production will actually be ending in December, presumably to make room for the electric Infiniti SUV and sedan that are still, I believe, on track to arrive at some point here around 2026. And so, this makes sense that there is kind of going to be a successor. There's also talk of a new QX65 that's going to be added into the lineup, and a actual new QX62 at some point. But as far as the QX50, it is hopefully, it's just going to be sad because it's almost certainly going to be that the electric replacement or whatever is going to be more expensive. So it really is kind of Infiniti kind of abandoning those lower cost buyers and really pushing themselves up market. We will see if it works out for them or not. But I reviewed the QX50 just back in December, and I think with the new pricing, it's actually priced pretty well and is a pretty decent value. And I think that it's actually, aging fairly well depending on your preferences. But I think, that old school appeal of actually having buttons and knobs and having screens that are integrated into the dash instead of giant iPads slapped onto the top of the dash. I think it, for a lot of people, there is still some appeal there. So I'm a little sad to see the QX50 go, honestly. But again, it makes sense, and hopefully the successor is well done. And the other canceled vehicle here is actually one that was canceled before it ever even had a chance to come here, and that's the Volkswagen ID.7. So the Car Guide spoke with Volkswagen's head of communications in Canada, who confirmed that it officially will not come to the US or Canada anymore. And a spokesperson explained to Automotive News that this is due to the ongoing challenging EV climate. And it's a shame because it seemed promising. I think the styling was actually pretty nice. It had a lift-back design, again, like I've been talking about, which I think increases the appeal of sedans and just is good all around, really. And it's also a bigger sedan option that I think was needed for people who, didn't have the option of the Passat anymore and wanted something bigger than the Jetta. So I'm not sure. Maybe Volkswagen is now regretting getting rid of the Passat at this point. They could have done another refresh like they did for Jetta. And, maybe had something, worth selling here or there. I don't know. The only thing I'm naively hoping for is that maybe you know, even if they can just for the next few years, they can bring over the gas-powered Passat that they do have over in Europe as the Passat. It's only a Passat wagon in Europe now, which is actually kind of cool. And I mean, that would be amazing if they just brought Passat wagons straight over here from Germany. That'd be a nice consolation prize for losing the ID7. We will see. But again, especially with these loosening regulations, if they can, you know, maybe shift some of those instead of having to sell them in the EU where they're getting fined heavily for, you know, not conforming to those emissions regulations there, they can ship them all off to us, where they can, you know, feel free to, you know, have whatever emissions regulations they want, and we'll see what ends up happening. But very interesting to hear that, and sad we didn't get a chance at the ID7 there. But lastly, I want to thank all of you that are members of the Maran Motoring Club. So we did have a few new members that did join this week, thanks to the very generous membership gifting that was done by many of you during last week's live stream. So huge thanks to those of you who were generous enough to do those membership gifts. I really appreciate it, and those new members, I'm sure, do as well. And so I want to give a shout out here to those gifters. So huge thank you to Brian Harrington, Grand Admiral Thrawn, Shane Lockett, Kyle, and Vinny2142. Thank you all so much once again. I really appreciate it. And I also want to give a big welcome here to those new members that were able to join for the first time. So a big welcome here to Sheldon Ray, Slumped Ray, Fanatic 757, Tom K, and Martian 86. So big welcome to all of you, and also welcome to all those members who are able to rejoin as well and come back into the Matt Brand Motoring Club. I hope you're all enjoying the membership perks so far. Be sure to join the live stream here on Sunday night if you can, where those members do always get that priority answering. And if you'd also like that priority answering and all the other perks that coming with being a member, there's always the join buttons here on the video page, on the channel page, and a link in the description. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Please leave a like to support these videos, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.